All right. Hey, it's Brooks here. I'm just, chatting with Eben and Eric. We're going to be talking a little bit about what I think is probably near and dear to both of all of us here is this idea of taking photography and tinkering with it and really making things that are unique and special to the craft and yourself as, I suppose, a representation of your ideas. So, Eric, I'm going to put you on the back burner, and I'm gonna get to know Eben here a little bit more, and I got a few questions I'd like to ask just to kind of get things going. Um, so, can you just give us like just a brief background, like a minute about kind of what your process is and how it all began?
Mm, I have been doing this sort of hybrid analog digital workflow for, I don't know, I can't count that how many years, many years. My background is technical, is digital. I used to work in animation, and as a way of getting a little bit away from the heavy digital stuff, I started doing analog photography, but the digital kept creeping in. And when I started doing wet prints, I chose alt process prints, which of course these days involve doing a digital negative, or it's how I do it anyway. Equipment is a little bit like Eric's, but I'm particularly intrigued by by really simple cameras and really simple lenses. So I have it's called a baby camera here.
Oh yeah,
It's
little
it's a
baby
yen
brownie.
camera. It's a yen camera from
Okay.
Japan, from probably the 20s or 30s. And they made them this way because it was incredibly cheap. And Japan was at that point not a well-off country, but they had aspirations to take pictures still. So they made these little cameras with a meniscus lens and a simple shutter that doesn't even flick closed for you. You open it and you hold it open until your exposure's done, and then you let go. It's always on B mode.
Nice.
And these cameras cost, again, which was equivalent of, a buck or something like that. And they had little folders with made out of almost origami style, a little folder with a little tiny strip of film, 35 millimeter unperforated film, slipped in there with a little dark slide made out of paper, which you
Hey, now, Eben, hold on.
That's
We're gonna. Okay, so
amazing.
here's what we're about to do. Here's what we're about to do.
Okay.
We're about to suspend what you're talking about because I have a feeling Eric's getting very excited because the
I
things you're
want one.
showing are very relative to the type of work he makes. So in this camera particularly, has it inspired anything in your work? As you see, it is with Eric. He's getting inspired. Is there anything about it that's inspired you to create a certain way?
Well, it has inspired me to work with what the limitations of that camera are. It doesn't produce
Right.
very, very sharp images. It doesn't produce they're not even that weird in the way that like a blurry Holga lens or something is. They're just kind of stripped down and very, very simple. So you have to find subjects that are, that pop essentially. It's very much it's not so much as the historical context of the camera, but the limitations of what the images produce that kind of drove me in a particular direction.
Yep.
I'm going to bring one up in the background here.
Yeah, and say that images that lend
Please, yeah, please
themselves
do.
to the inherent character of the equipment. Right.
Exactly.
Because you can't
Right.
shoot necessarily a sports photo with that, or if you do, it has to be an image that, I'm going to do this for 1 second. I'm going to, half a second. I'm going to pan. Like it has to be something that can be captured by the limitation
Eric,
of the photo. Of the
And
camera.
I would add to that. I would add to that, Eric. And as Eben's picture is showing, not just the inherent character of the equipment, but the inherent character of the experience, right? Because we're talking about. You guys know what we're talking about. This is a bit. It's got a bit of it's kind of magical. So
this image behind me is just an image of a railroad trestle that's near here. It's a place where two railroad lines meet. And,
so are you shooting 35 millimeter film, or are you cutting down paper? Because it
this,
seems to me
I cut down X-ray film, And the
Okay,
reason
see,
the reason
Okay,
why I
got
got
it.
X-ray film is because it's orthochromatic and I could load it in the
right?
well, it has that look. Plus, I could load
Mhm.
it in a dark room. With I could
Yeah,
turn it
X-ray film is
under a safe light.
X-ray film's
Right.
popular.
So
Yeah, it is.
do you pull it, because that little meniscus lens, like shooting? Sorry for nerding out. With essentially the button, you might get like a 1/25th of a second at best if you just
Oh,
flick
at
it real
best, yeah.
fast.
Yeah,
And that's usually shot at like 50 ASA or so. So is
I
that a little
pull it.
quick for that? Oh, you pull it?
I pull it. Yeah, I
Okay.
pull it down to 20, ASA 25,
Okay.
which also has this nice effect of bringing down the contrast, which is really nice.
Right. I was like, I'm used to taking that X-ray film and actually pushing it. I figured out how to take, if it's the Kodak BRA Ectoscan stuff,
That's what this is.
which most people tend to go with.
Yeah.
I've just figured out lately how to push it to 200 ASA, a full 2 stops, and get still fully tonal results. Because I was shooting with that 1890s brass lens,
Mhm.
and I wanted to be able to shoot a minimum of like f11 for portraits.
Mhm.
Because I'd modified it. I'd taken the stock front element out
Mhm.
because it was too sharp. Like
Mhm.
a wonderful secret of those late 1800s brass lenses that come with a shutter is they're gorgeous. They not only are they really pretty, but they also shoot beautifully. I mean, they just shoot beautiful images. I mean, this one was built for.
You didn't want it to be so beautiful, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I wanted some character, and
So this is from an old folder.
No, this is from an old 5x7.
Okay.
Right. But I didn't know it,
Mhm.
and so I tried to like crack it wide open and see if I could get some character out of it, and I couldn't get any character at all. It was sharp edge to edge. It was.
Is this a Kodak lens?
Rochester lens. It's actually
Pretty much.
Rochester Optical.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
Uh,
Real quick though, I was thinking, I don't want to get off the topic of this lens, but Eben, when you see this lens, how does it like? What kind of equipment are you using, and how does this relate to kind of things that Eric are talking about? Because you guys, there's definitely some similarity in you guys' work.
Right.
Well, the lens in this little baby is kind of the opposite of what he
Right.
likes. It's slow, it's blurry, it's poorly
Well-
manufactured. It's just like the other extreme.
Right.
So that's what I've been using.
Right. Although
Yeah.
I will say, to finish the point on this one, is it was too sharp, and I didn't want it to be that sharp. I couldn't get any character out of it, even on a 4x5 wide open, because it was intended for a 5x7. It shot like a modern lens. It was too nice. So I took out the front element out of it. These are just really nice generic thread ends, and put in a different achromat, so I could get just a massive difference in just a huge drop off, essentially.
Mhm.
So that if I want to shoot sharp portraits, like I have to shoot f8 or f11, or actually f11, or I'm doomed, right? Which is why I pushed on that project, pushed the X-ray film to 200. But no, I love noise. Like if it's entirely sharp everywhere, it drives me kind of crazy. That's why I started building my own lenses.
Real quick, so there's definitely some common ground. You guys both prefer lenses with character. You guys are both doing these very
because of characters.
Yeah, and you're doing these very esoteric processes. What do you guys, based on you guys' experience, how long you guys been doing this for, the people you know, everything, looking at the way things are now, what is the attraction back to this? Like, and you guys can vibe off that, but like, what are people finding, like with Holga's lomography, these characteristics that people are looking for?
Well, it's pretty clear to me that people are looking for something that feels like is not just technical, that you can feel it's the hand of the artist, and it's also the sense of craft that you get from doing something that isn't just done on your iPhone.
Right.
I think people love to have that sense that there's a little bit of element of chance, there's a little bit of element of skill, and there's also something that you could only do if your two hands and your brain were fully engaged in making this thing happen.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think people no longer, I'm just going to try to find an image, but like the explosion of digital photography as a whole, and then phones in particular have really, some people will say democratized photography. And that's fairly true, but it's also created an explosion of just really generally nice images, generally nice, clean photos. They may not have a lot of emotional impact, and they may just be like sunsets and whatnot, but there's just a lot of nice images everywhere. But as a result, there's a lot of clean images. So if you harken back to the early days of photography, not everything was clean. The wet plate, there's lots of, crazy stuff that happened on wet plates, or even dry plates or prints. And although a lot of that photography was also technically perfect edge to edge, I think when you produce work that's not digital, that has a lot of inherent flaws or a certain amount of what I like to call like controlled chaos, it stands out a lot. And the emotion and the work that you as a photographer put into it comes through, right? Because you care, and the process is, the end photo is a result of the process, but it's also a result of the care and the effort that you put into it, plus things that are just completely out of your control. And you can't really do that.
Ditto.
You can't reproduce that with digital. I've tried, like every once in a while, I don't know about you, but if it's a shoot that really matters to me, I always take a digital backup just in case the film gets screwed. But then it's like, I have the piece, and this one film shot didn't turn out, but I've got to reproduce the portrait. And I take the digital file out and I try to make the digital file look like the rest of the portraits. And it takes 12 hours or more. And then if you still really look, you can tell that it's just not an analog shot. It's not.
Right.
So the other thing I've been doing to add the sense of, or to engage more fully with the image and make something that really feels like, and you can see the hand of the artist, is do prints where I actually paint with watercolors over the image. And I started doing that because in some of my images, the world was it was hard to see what I was trying to get at. When I went from the color of the real world to the black and white of the image, things would become indistinct. And I wanted to bring that out. And then I realized that I had this tool I could use, that is paint, to invent a world that had that same kind of retro feel that a lot of old pictures have, but also I could take it in whatever direction I wanted. So I started working with watercolor typically over Van Dyke prints. So I'd make old-fashioned Van Dyke prints and then paint over them, and get what I got, and was able to invent, a little bit something that felt like a real world, but also felt a little bit like not of this world.
Eben, have you got one of those handy you can share on the screen?
I do indeed.
And what image do you have up right now, Eric?
I've actually been putting my thumb over this. It's sort of funny you were saying that, Eben. Like I've been experimenting, my thumb, with photos of burn areas from the recent fires here with black and white, because black and white's what I've got. I can't afford to shoot color, but black and white doesn't really carry a burn zone very well, like at all.
Right.
So I started trying to figure out how to do old Kodachrome bichromes digitally. During World War II, US didn't have the dye for a 3-color chrome. So they actually, for a while, created a color film that only had a blue and a green. Actually, no, a blue and a red layer, and then the eye filled in the green, and it created. And
it looks remarkably good, doesn't it?
They look really nice, but they're sort of like this beautiful washed out touristy photo. But I couldn't control my own process well enough to do that. These images are a combination of panchromatic film and lithographic film, double loaded into a 4x5 film holder, with the lithographic film in front of the panchromatic film. Right, and then the lithographic film, being a magenta anti-halation layer, acts essentially like a magenta filter for the regular film behind it.
How cool.
Yeah, and so the front being orthochromatic picks up the blues, and the back being filtered for magenta picks up a completely different thing, and they combine. But I had to start digitally hand coloring them because I couldn't get the regular coloring to work, and the black and white just didn't carry the burn zone at all. So I'm like, I got to color it somehow. So I started hand coloring these digitally.
You need to start doing gum prints.
Yes, I should.
Right. Good point, Evan. Good point. Hey, and I want to say something real quick because I know we're coming up short on time, and I know we're getting it going.
I warned you.
But yeah, right. Evan brought up a good point. This idea of while you're in your process and you're complacent. I didn't mean to say complacent. I'm sorry. Comfortable with what you're doing. How important is it that you are constantly challenging yourself? And this is kind of a way to round it out. Like, what kind of advice would you give people in photography that have been doing it? What advice would you guys give them on that? Like, what kind of advice would you give them?
Well, I just answered a question. So Evan's definitely first. And I've loved these colored these watercolor panoramics of yours, though. I've seen these before, and they are really, really lovely.
So behind me is this watercolored panoramic that I was describing. And it's interesting that you asked the question about how important is it to essentially shake things up for yourself or break the mold. One of the things that started me doing these panoramics like this one was that I was surrounded by a bunch of people who were doing other kinds of painting, either watercolors or oils or whatever. And that had the effect of making me look at the world through a little bit through their eyes. And that kind of also woke me up and made me think, oh, well, there's this whole range of things that other artists can do that I haven't been doing as a photographer. I should try that. It'll be interesting. Plus, it gave me something to talk about with these friends of mine who were doing paintings. Like, oh, hey, look, I can paint.
Right.
Yeah, man, for me, I just, how to put it? I'm always curious, it's hard for me not to sort of be like a squirrel. I'm like, oh, what's that? Oh, what's that? Let's try that. Let's try that. So it's hard for me to settle on anything. I have too much curiosity to settle on anything for too long. Like settling on, like, okay, I started hand making lenses, and then I was like, okay, well, let's try making my own shutters and like trying different types of lenses and that sort of stuff. Like, how far can I push this? So I guess my advice, or the reason why folks shouldn't always stay comfortable, is because there's a lot of fun to be had in the experimentation and in the learning, right? Like, failure isn't fun per se. It's not great when I try something different and it doesn't work out. But at the same time, I learned something constantly from those failures. And yeah, I wasn't able to do the bichrome thing, but okay, so now it's pushed me to learn how to at least digitally hand color images. And they're and initially I didn't like them very much, so I had to figure out, okay, what can I do? How can I like these?
Well, face it, one reason we do all of this stuff is because it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nobody's saying you need to go and take pictures and make lenses.
Right,
We're doing
exactly.
it because it's a huge amount of fun. And so
right.
By trying a bunch of different things, you get to try you get to have different kinds of fun all the time.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Exactly.